And I'm not quite sure how I can top that. That's been a pretty spectacular opening series of music and a personal composition that really fit in so beautifully with what I want to talk about. And one of the things I decided to do right after Peggy called me, and before we start I just want to send some loving, healing energy to Peggy, who's not feeling well today, so she's not here, so I'm just taking a moment to hold her in my heart for healing, and to thank her for the conversations we've had, and for her continuing to invite me up here. And the decision I made this week after she called and said, what do you want to speak about? And I heard the message and I thought, oh, that's probably a good thing she's asking me, because it's going to force me to figure out what the heck I'm going to talk about when I get up here. And so I've been having a number of ideas, but what came up for me really clearly, my heart kind of said yes, was God here and now. And so as I started to kind of sit down in front of my computer screen and say, okay, what am I going to say, what am I going to write? The thing that kept saying was, why don't you, you've got some ideas, but why don't you wait to see what's here, what's now, when you stand up and connect with those wonderful souls at Unity of Ukiah, and really make a connection. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is just feel each of you right here, right now, and try to speak loud enough so you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. And just breathe in this moment. And just feeling each of you. My ego mind always wants to know. Wants to have the answers, wants to figure out what's happening next. And the song was so powerful because it just kept bringing us back to, in this moment now, we can choose. So right now, letting that sound and that word resonate in my mind, and being in here in front of you, knowing that you're all here waiting for me to say something that helps you connect here and now. My thought is, what's my choice here and now? Is my choice to need to figure it out, to have an answer, to have to give you something to say, oh, this is it, this is the answer? Or it's my choice here and now to say, I don't know. I don't have the answer. I was actually talking to my friend this past week. It's been a very lifey week, as my sister calls it. That roller coaster of up and down, really in that place of not knowing. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine talking about this sort of major crisis that had come up, one of those major crises that come up in our lives. And if you look around at the world, there's a lot of crisis out there. There's a lot of I don't know what's next. And I was feeling that. It had to do with relationship, it had to do with finances, it had to do with a lot of those real important things that can call to us and, make us crazy, move us out of that heart space and make us start to choose stress. And my friend, in her desire to be helpful and loving, said, well, maybe you just have to face it, that you're a screw-up and you don't have the answer. I was having a tough time. Tears, I was always kind of on the phone with her. I was really in that place where I don't know what to do. And, it was deep stuff coming up. And what we had talked about before we got to that point was we'd sort of made the realization that this isn't really about what's happening in my outside world. This is historical stuff. It's one of my favorite phrases is if it's hysterical, it's historical. This was one of those times. It was childhood stuff coming up, and my outside life was kind of triggering it. So she said, maybe this is a gift, which was a good thing to hear, and that was really what allowed me to even go deeper. But when she said, well, let's just face it, you're a screw-up, and you don't have the answer, I began to laugh in the middle of my tears because I really kind of got it at a deeper level. That really was the truth. that I don't have the answer. And she said, maybe what you need to do is just call in grace. Is just to choose that you don't know, that you're a screw-up, that you do the best you can, but life is going to show up as it shows up. And all we can really do in each moment is choose. So my question is, what is our choice? What is our choice? And so in thinking about my topic, which is God, here and now, maybe it's trusting that that is the one thing that we know. That we know. Some of the notes I made is, what do we really know right here in this moment? We can look around at life and look at a rose, or a pearl, or a child's face, and we can feel joy, we can feel the miracle that's in there, but we have to admit that we don't really know what it is. We can't, it's really something that we can't conceive of in our limited human mind. But the knowing inside that we have that it's a miracle, that life is happening, and all we can really do is say yes, that is faith. That is trust. That you can sit here in this moment, looking at me, choosing and wanting to come here, because you don't know. It's that curiosity inside, which is the spark of life, which is God, which encourages us to take each new breath. Not knowing and being willing in that not knowing to continue to take the next step, to make the next choice, to risk to love somebody, to risk to try something new, to risk to say, something inside me says, I want to write a song, and I don't even know how to write music, right?
Right.
And then to take that step, that's a trust and a knowing in the I don't know. It's faith. And the only place that we can really experience that is right now. So that idea of the inner child, which came up for me during my crisis this week, when my friend said, this is hysterical, so it's historical. I've been doing something called the presence process. And the author that wrote this process is called Michael Brown, and he came to it because he was going along in what he called a blissfully unconscious life. Wasn't really aware, just was doing what was there, was having a wonderful time. He was a musician and a music journalist. And he developed this illness that the doctors didn't know what to do, that caused him to have these episodes of intense, unbearable pain that would come up out of the blue. And in his spiritual journey, he realized that he had lost touch with an inner voice, that inner knowing that allows us to be in that place of I don't know. And in going through his journey, he realized that when he would go into the present moment and trust that I don't know place, that the pain would lessen. The episodes would be less often. The doctors had told him that most people who have this disease either become drug addicts or kill themselves. So he really had no options from the outside world. He needed to go within. And so this process I've been doing, that he developed through his own journey, has been about doing daily, simple meditations, repeating certain words, and really being willing to go within and just listen. Listen to what was there, listen to my feelings, and ultimately invite in my inner child. Because his belief is that what shows up on our outside world and triggers our stuff is the power of our inner child to really manipulate life around us, to really say, pay attention to me. And I think in human evolution, as we stood up from animals in the fields and began to conceive of ourselves as something separate, which I think is what this ego mind is, and I think it was helpful. We needed that mind to develop and be separate for a moment, or for a long moment. It's been a few thousand years now. And I think that separation of being aware that we were separate, it really relates to the Adam and Eve story. That moment when they began to conceive of good and evil. And of course, in God's point of view, there is no good and evil. When we read our wonderful affirmation, there's only God, the good, omnipotent. So what appears as evil is our sense of separation, is our lack of trust in that inner knowing that everything is happening perfectly, that God is orchestrating things. So when things come up in your outer life that trigger you and you think, that's not right, I've got to fix it, and you go to the outside to try to fix it, we're living in a fantasy world. We're trying to change the effect and not go into the cause, which is that inner knowing within us, which is God. So this presence process encourages you to go back and reconnect with that part of you. That quote from the Bible, which I have here, and I love it. The wolf will live with the lamb. It's talking about duality to me. The wolf will live with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat. The calf with the young lion, and the calf, the young lion, and the fatted calf together. And the little child will lead them. So it's that innocence. It's that place where we were as children, where we didn't feel a disconnect. And part of the child rearing practice, the way it evolved, is to teach the child, to pull the child out of that sense of oneness and teach the child, this is good, this is bad. Don't get angry, don't feel this. And so they begin to judge parts of themselves. We all do. We begin to judge parts of ourselves. And the child goes into a closet, goes into a box. And so that's really what's been coming up for me as I do this process. I'm learning to listen to that inner knowing and let go of trying to fix my outer world so that I can feel better. Because the reason my outer world is not working is because I have to look at my feelings and myself. There's nothing I need to fix out there. And so it was a powerful week. It was a powerful week, and guess what? Figuring that out didn't suddenly fix my outside world. But what it did do was bring me to a place inside my heart. Allowed me to be here with you and connect. Allowed me to feel the power in that moment when Marvin shared that we're going to do this song again. And boy, wasn't that great when he said, I like to do things wrong because it makes me feel like a teenager. And that's what happens when we're teenagers. It's that child is still not stifled totally, but we're trying to fit into the outside world. And part of us knows that it's not about rules, that we do need to stick with that part of us that says, this may be against everything anyone else says, but I need to say yes to this thing inside of me. So, I want to talk a little bit about forgiveness and judgment and regret and compassion and unconditional love. I get back to the idea that I did in the meditation this morning about our body, when we tune into it, and that process of breathing is us constantly affirming yes. Yes to not knowing. Yes to the inner knowing that's within us that causes us to take each breath. That really is beyond our ability to control. Right? Try to hold your breath, and what happens? Either got to breathe or you're going to pass out. And once you pass out, you're going to start breathing again. So that life force is stronger than our ego mind. Can we train and allow that ego mind to start learning to trust that inner not knowing. Isn't that why we're here? Isn't that why we come to unity? Isn't that our principles? To trust that inner knowing. So regret is suddenly moving away from that belief that there is only one power, one presence, active and present in our lives, God the good omnipotent. Regret is that, oh my God, something went wrong. It can't go wrong. We do the best we can with what we know, and then we move forward. We can't look back. Judgment is the same thing. When you judge another, they've done that wrong, you're saying that somehow you know better, and that God in you knows better about what's right for them. Of course, the most painful thing we all do, and it's why we judge others, is because there's that inner voice inside us judging ourselves. Judging ourselves. And if we really look, we know that we've always done the best we could with the information we have and with the tools that we were given. So let's take a deep breath into that and feel it. And let's invite the ego mind in, which the ego mind gets a lot of bad stuff. We're always saying that darn ego mind. The ego mind is wonderful. It's wonderful and we need it, but we don't want it in charge. We don't want the horse to be free without someone at the reins. We don't want the ego mind at the reins. And that's where being in that not knowing, right here, right now, is going to allow us to trust, to say that there's nothing to fix, there's only the ability to say yes. And the idea of saying yes brings us back to compassion, brings us to loving kindness and acceptance, and allows us to feel that experience of unconditional love. The ego mind spends so much time looking at from the outside world to try to find unconditional love. Well, I'm going to get it here, I'm going to get it there, you're going to give it to me. When the truth is, the only way we can experience unconditional love is when it's moving through us. If we're trying to get something, suddenly there's a condition. There's only going to be love here if I get it. When it's moving through us, like when we were listening to that Shalom song, which was so powerful, how many of you felt just an open heart and an energy moving through you? Unconditional love. When we heard the song, and we realized that, one of our blessed members of the congregation had written it. It had been an inspiration. We felt the unconditional love. We felt it because we knew that that's what was flowing through you when you wrote it, and we felt it here. So unconditional love is not to be gotten from outside. It is forgiving. Interesting word there, isn't it? Forgiving. And that's really what forgiveness is about. We think of it as letting someone off the hook, or, oh, they did me wrong and I've got to make them pay. It has nothing to do with the other person. It's for you to feel, to give and experience unconditional love. And so the idea of saying yes is very important. And I want to make this clear, because this is one of my little notes that came up very clearly, that I'm not talking about being a doormat. We say yes to life, but if we're honest about life and God here and now, we have to trust that that experience of God here and now starts with the self. It starts with that inner child, and it starts with trusting that inner knowing. So how often do we say yes when we mean no because we don't want to upset someone else, we don't want to cause problems, we deny ourselves because we want something else? How many times do we say no when we really mean yes? Something's urging us to do something, we say no because we're afraid, we say no because we don't know where it's going to get us. The ego mind wants to know the answer. One of the things that what's his name, the Est fellow, Werner Erhard says, and I never took his course, but my friend who was on the phone the other day, she's the one that took it, she reminded me of that saying, knowing is the booby prize. Ego mind wants to know. It wants to have the answers. But as soon as we get that answer, what do? We say, oh, okay, that's it. We stop looking, we stop being curious, we go back in the box and close the door. Oh, I figured it out, I know. Kind of fold our arms and everything gets closed off. Not knowing leaves us in that place of openness, of wonder, of questioning. So, I want to end today by just encouraging you to be in your not knowing. And to recognize that that not knowing opens you to that inner knowing, which is God here and now. It allows you to ride the wave, to lean into life and say what's next. And actually to trust the not knowing, because there's an inner knowing that's there with you, with each breath. We really are living in a wave of evolution that the spark of God created. We don't have to know how, but it's here, now, inside us.